Iran's president-elect is calling it a victory of moderation over extremism. Cleric Hassan Rouhani sees off conservative hardline rivals and promises to seek constructive interaction with the world. But can one man help end years of international isolation? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Rida Fakhri. Welcome to the program. A cleric who campaigned to steer Iran on a more moderate course has won the presidential election. It's an outcome that has pushed the country to the brink of an extraordinary political transformation and lifted the spirits of those demanding reform. Crowds celebrated the victory of Hassan Rouhani, sensing hope for more social freedoms and for some relief from economic hardship brought on by years of sanctions imposed because of Iran's nuclear program. Rouhani said, "This victory is a victory of wisdom, a victory of moderation, a victory of growth and awareness, and a victory of commitment over extremism and ill temper." Rouhani has been a key figure in Iranian politics for many years. He served on the Supreme National Security Council for 16 years and was National Security Advisor to 2 former presidents. He took a tough stance during student demonstrations back in 1999, warning that those found guilty of sabotage or destroying state property would face the death penalty. Rouhani also served as Iran's chief nuclear negotiator from 2003 to 2005, and he has been described by Western officials as an experienced diplomat and politician who is fair to deal with. Soraya Eleni reports now from Tehran. She's been gauging reaction to his election victory.
Celebrating a change in government, Hassan Rouhani is Iran's president-elect. It's an overwhelming indication Iranians want a change from hardline policies.
I want Rouhani to take care of the economic situation, employment, and also fix the universities that are not in a good situation now.
Though his supporters have high expectations of Rouhani, he also has expectations of them.
I'm proud that the great people of Iran, the honourable people, thought that I deserved this. They trusted me so that I can begin on the path to serve the country, to enhance people's lives and welfare, and preserve national pride and national interests. I deeply feel that I need your assistance along this path. I need you to be there. I need your cooperation.
Issues at the forefront of many people's minds are the economy and unemployment. Iran has a young population which is highly educated, but many graduates are struggling to find jobs. They want the crippling international sanctions imposed on Iran by the international community under the presidency of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad lifted. Rouhani is not new to politics and is himself an outspoken critic of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He served as Iran's nuclear negotiator, but after the election of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in 2005, he resigned from his post.
I expect him to at least restore the economic situation to what it was 8 years ago in Hatami's term. I'm not political, but I live in my country and I expect to live in my country comfortably.
I want the economy to be fixed. That is one of the most important problems. I used to be a shopkeeper, but I quit. I couldn't deal with the prices that increased day by day.
While Rouhani is not the hardliner his predecessor is, he's still not the reformist some of his supporters may want.
If we want to choose a way to develop the country, ensure the welfare of the people and establish peace and stability, there's no better way than enforcing the law and remaining committed to the law.
Rouhani is a longtime friend of the man who holds the real power in Iran, the supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And while he says he wants to reach out by getting away from extremism in foreign policy, he's also promised there would be no surrender to Western demands in Iran's nuclear negotiations. Both Iranians and the world will see in the next 4 years how this will play out on the domestic and international stage. Soraya Eleni for Inside Story, Tehran.
Let's go straight now to our guests. In Tehran, Fouad Izadi, a professor of political communications at Tehran University. Here in Doha, Houman Majd, author and journalist and former advisor to Iran's former president Mohammad Khatami. And in our Washington studios, Raza Marashi, research director at the National Iranian-American Council. Professor Izadi, the victory of Rouhani certainly generated a lot of excitement in Iran among those who want to see change. How much real change, though, can the president-elect bring, given the very real limitations and constraints of the office?
As you know, Iran's president is the head of the executive branch, so he chooses the ministers. The ministers have to get an approval or a confirmation from the parliament, from the Majlis. And he basically spends the country's money for different projects that the different ministries in the country have. So his power is not very limited in terms of basically running the country on a daily basis. In terms of foreign policy, he is not the only actor in Iran's foreign policy. We have the supreme leader who will have a say in major issues, not necessarily the minor issues. And then we have the National Security Council in Iran that has members from the different centers of power here. And the president will have influence. He is going to direct and appoint the foreign minister. But his, as you said, his powers are not unlimited. He has said, because this question was asked from Dr. Rouhani, whether with the current political system and the constitution, can you do your job? And his answer was positive. He is the second person in the country's structure. So he's the second powerful man in Iran when he becomes president.
Majd, the second most powerful man, but of course ultimate power lies with the supreme leader. To what extent does this election outcome, though, prove to the world that this was a real election?
Well, I think I mean, there's no question you can't dismiss the images we've seen in Iran of people celebrating in big numbers all over Iran, but specifically in the big cities. I don't think there's any doubt that it was a legitimate election, and I think even the U.S. has acknowledged that. So Rouhani comes in with a mandate. There's no question he has a mandate, which makes it actually a little bit difficult for Westerners who may be antagonistic towards the Islamic Republic to continue to demonize Iran when it appears at this point anyway that he has the support of the people. There's euphoria in Tehran based on our information and the reports we've seen for his election, and I think that it's going to be something that the Iranians are looking forward to, a new administration change from the previous 8 years, which have been characterized by repression, by, as Rouhani himself said, a securitization atmosphere, not quite a police state, but very close. And I think people's expectations are that that will slowly change. They're not delusional. The Iranian electorate is not delusional. They're much like people everywhere else in the world. They're quite sophisticated. They understand the ship of state doesn't turn on a dime. Things aren't going to change overnight. But for now, they're happy that they've been able to have a voice in their future, and that voice has been listened to.
Raza Marashi, things aren't likely to change overnight in Iran, but how likely are we to see a different approach in Washington to Iran now that a more moderate, quote-unquote, candidate has won?
I think that's probably the elephant in the room. In the bigger scheme of things, especially since Barack Obama came into office, Washington's had a tough time getting its footing when it comes to Iran policy. And oftentimes when you have a tough time getting your footing, you fall back into what you know. And what Washington knows is sanctions and other forms of pressure. They know how to do it. They know how to process it. They know how to strong-arm other countries around the world to participate in something they might not participate in otherwise as it pertains to the sanctions. So now it's going to be much more difficult as a result of having a more moderate face as an Iranian president. But I actually think that there are people in the Obama administration that would prefer to solve this thing peacefully. So this can go a long way. The election of Mr. Rouhani can go a long way towards empowering people in Washington that are more pro-diplomacy. And I think that can be considered nothing but positive.
But will there be a recognition, though, that sanctions really haven't worked, that they haven't affected Iran policy on its nuclear program, that they've affected Iran's economy dramatically, that they've affected the average person on the street? Or will we see a continuation of U.S. policy being affected by the pro-Israel narrative on this?
I don't think you're going to see sanctions lifted anytime soon, and I think it's a safe bet to say that more sanctions are on the way. But in the bigger scheme of things, this does present the Obama administration with the best opportunity that they've had since really he came into office to put some of the sanctions on the negotiating table and trade them for real and meaningful compromises that can de-escalate the conflict and try and figure out a way to build a better future, not only for the Iranian people, but also in terms of U.S.-Iran relations. And it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint, because just like the United States has politics, Iran has politics. So both sides are going to have to figure out how they want to recalibrate. And like I said, that's going to take some time. But this is probably one of the few optimistic moments we've had in recent years.
And looking at the internal politics, the dynamics of all this, Professor Izadi, how will Rouhani be able to live up to his promise of trying to ease international sanctions while at the same time maintaining Iran's right to nuclear power, to enriching uranium under the Non-Proliferation Treaty?
As you know, we had 8 candidates, and 7 of them, except Dr. Jalili, who is the current Secretary of National Security Council, basically criticized the approach that the country has had in the last few years. And every candidate was saying that he would be able to do a better job with regard to closing this folder of the nuclear program. So it seems that within the country there is a consensus from both principalists and conservatives and reformers that a change needs to come. And I think even the Supreme Leader is very much ready to end this type of pressure that Iran is receiving. And as I said, there's a consensus with regard to getting rid of these sanctions as soon as possible, and then coming in terms with the demands that the other side may have. All the Iranian leaders have been asking so far is basically having West, the United States especially, recognize Iran's right to enrich uranium internally, and then other things are up for grabs and up for negotiations. I think, as your other guest mentioned, the problem has been with the Obama administration in terms of not really wanting to finish this. They seem to think that the pressures are working. They seem to think that economic sanctions are doing their job, and they are waiting for economic sanctions to do more harm, basically. And then they want to get Iran to a very weak position, and they think that at that time they can get a deal that's quite satisfactory for them.
Mr. Majd, I mean, we talk about all these international outside factors, certainly a lot of them emanating from Washington and some European capitals, but how much change, how much softening can there be in Iran on this issue, the nuclear issue? When you look back at the kind of role and the kind of approach that Rouhani displayed when he was chief nuclear negotiator back in 2003, 2005, and the kinds of concessions Iran made then voluntarily to suspend some aspects of its nuclear program, what does it tell us about the kind of approach we can expect next now that he is president?
Well, I think we can expect some compromise or some forms of compromise that would still allow Iran to have a face-saving way out of this situation. I don't think it's 2003 again. I don't think the Iranian government, not even Hassan Rouhani, would agree to a complete suspension of the program or would agree to, say, shut down the Fordo enrichment plant tomorrow because the U.S. has demanded it. I think that it's going to be a little bit more subtle than that. I think there'll be different kinds of suggestions, such as suspending 20% enrichment. That'll go on the table right away, in my opinion. I think Iran's always been willing to do that. Iran hasn't proposed that in a way that was really reasonable for the other side to accept. And they've been very hesitant. They've been sending mixed signals. But I think what's really important here is that because of the mandate that Rouhani has and because of the type of person he is, and because of his popularity right now with the people of Iran, especially the youth, he will be able to present Iran's side to his own people in a much better way than Ahmadinejad could, or Dr. Jalili could, or even the Supreme Leader can. And if the U.S. is not reasonable, or is seen to be unreasonable in its demands of Iran, I think that the people of Iran will turn against America far more than they are against them now. And I think it'll be quite damaging for the United States to not take advantage, as Reza pointed out earlier, to take advantage of this opportunity where there is really an opportunity, a desire among the people. There clearly is a desire on Rouhani's part, and there appears to be a desire on the Supreme Leader's part to close this nuclear file. So if the U.S. doesn't take advantage because of whatever the circumstances, whether it's the Israeli lobby, whether it's a congressman or the Senate, I think that it's a huge, huge mistake. And I would, certainly, if I was in a position of power, I would be looking at this as a very positive thing, because he does have this mandate from the people.
Well, let's take a look then at some of the reaction that has come in from around the world to Rouhani's victory. In Israel, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned against wishful thinking, quote unquote, and said Iran would be tested by its deeds. The White House says it remains ready to engage the Iranian government and praised the will of the Iranian people who were determined to act to shape their future. The Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed confidence that Rouhani will promote and further strengthen Russian-Iranian relations. And Britain called on Rouhani to set Iran on a different course and address international concerns about its nuclear program. Reza Marashi, will the West also have to display a certain level of goodwill and confidence-building measures to also respect Iran's right, as many Iranians would see it, to nuclear power?
Well, in theory, the blame game oftentimes comes up where Western powers will blame Iran, Iran will blame Western powers, and then the chips fall where they may in terms of people in different countries believing one side or the next. But I think reality is a little bit different. I think both sides have come up short in terms of trying to find a peaceful solution to this crisis. When one side has been ready to dance, unfortunately the other side has not. So yeah, I do think now that to a certain degree you could say that the ball is in the Obama administration's court. It's much more difficult to isolate Iran and to say negative things about Iran. It's not impossible, but it's much more difficult when you have a smiling cleric who blows kisses to people that just finished voting for him. And that's what we've been seeing over the past 24 hours. People in Iran, by all accounts, are elated. And that's what this is really about at the end of the day. If you juxtapose what you saw on the television or in YouTube videos, or even talking to people in Iran with what the British government had to say, I think there's a bit of a disconnect. So let's give Iranians their moment, let them enjoy it for a couple of days, and then we can get down to business.
Professor Izadi, as far as most Iranians are concerned, certainly the younger generation of Iranians, what would they want to see President-elect Rouhani do first when he does take office? Because there's a lot of focus on Iran's role regionally, certainly in Syria, in its support of Hezbollah. To what extent are Iranians happy with this kind of policy continuing? And does it matter whether Rouhani is president or not? Or will these big foreign policy issues continue to be determined by the Supreme Leader, Khamenei?
Well, I think if you talk to serious Iran experts and Iran watchers in the United States or in Europe or elsewhere, they will tell you that the way the Iranian foreign policy works is through consensus. So we don't have one person deciding the whole thing. We have a consensus among the president, the Supreme Leader, National Security Council. And that is the reason that during 2003 to 2005, when Rouhani was the Secretary of the National Security Council, Iran actually suspended enriching uranium voluntarily. And the Supreme Leader went along with that. And then Iran started enriching uranium again when they got nothing from the West. So this is one point that I think your viewers may want to know. The second thing is that we have a lot of young people in Iran that have just voted. We had a 73% participation rate in the election. And the question that a lot of people here have is that when they compare the political system in Iran, they see a higher participation rate than the United States. In the US, you get about 55% participation for presidential election. When they see that they had 8 candidates here that they could choose from, and the American people get 2 candidates, when they see that in the United States the cost of the 2012 election was about $7,000 million, and here, because the television provides free airtime, the candidates don't have to go to the rich and beg the rich for running for elections. When they see these things, they realize that the political system is actually not very bad when you compare it to other democracies. And in international relations theory, we have this theory of democratic peace, which means that the democracies don't fight each other. So when they see the US claims to be a democracy, and then they see a democracy of their own, they wonder why there is this disconnect, why there is this problem between the two countries. And they realize that what their government is saying, what Rouhani is saying, is actually quite reasonable. And that's why they voted for him. And that's why when you look at public opinion polls, Iran's nuclear program gets over 90% of approval rate based on the BBC polling that was done not very long ago.
Houman Majd, one of the key concerns, it would seem, for many of the people who voted for Rouhani is the belief that he might be able to fix the economy. Many of them say they want to see the economic situation restored to what it was like 8 years ago under President Khatami. How much work, how much compromise will be needed to achieve that, and how much work will the new president have to do to undo some of the damage that has been done to Iran's relations with the West, certainly to its image and to its economic well-being?
Well, the economic policy isn't solely, or the economic malaise in Iran is not solely due to sanctions. It's affected by sanctions, certainly, and as you pointed out earlier, it's affected quite severely by the sanctions. And therefore, foreign policy, international policy, the nuclear policy is somehow tied into the economic policy as well, or into the economic situation, certainly in Iran. I think that there's going to be a huge difference in the kinds of people who are running the economic policy in Iran, who are planning the economic policy in Iran. He's going to have competent technocrats, competent managers, people probably from previous administrations who are competent, back in positions of power in the ministries. He'll have an economic plan that makes sense for a lot of people. As he said today in his press conference, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time. And on top of that, he will also have to relieve tensions with the outside world in order to be able to have some of these sanctions lifted, so that Iran can continue to trade, collect the money that it's owed for its oil, and so on and so forth. So yes, he has to do all that stuff, and it's going to take an awful long time, and it's going to be an incredibly difficult task. But I don't think people are, again, delusional in Iran about what he can do and in what period of time he can do it. Unemployment's not going to go down overnight. It's going to take a while for business to start up again. And it is dependent on so many factors, it's very hard to say. But I think in general, because people have fond memories of the Khatami years, both economically and politically and socially, in terms of the freedoms that they enjoyed, relative freedoms that they enjoyed then, Rouhani kind of represented a return to that period for a lot of people, economically as well as politically and socially. And I think the feeling is that a competent man like him, who has worked in competent administrations, will be able to do something to relieve the pressure that the Iranians are currently living under.
Reza Marashi, how much of an opportunity then is this for the US as well to reset its relationship with Tehran? His victory certainly defied expectations and conventional wisdom. What message, though, does it send the conservative ruling clerical establishment in Iran and also the hardliners within the US administration?
It's a great question. I mean, the two groups that you just described, both in the United States and Iran, are typically the ones that have played spoiler when the United States and Iran have tried to figure out a way to solve the differences between them. And I don't think that that's necessarily going to change per se, but I do think it becomes much more difficult because of the mandate that Houman was describing. And also because, let's remember, Mr. Rouhani does have a working relationship, a historical working relationship with the supreme leader. It doesn't mean that they agree on every single issue all the time, but it means that they've done business before, and perhaps they can do business again. And, he was kind of seen as a consensus candidate. Reformists and centrists created an alliance to back Mr. Rouhani, and I think that's meaningful in a lot of ways. As it pertains to the U.S., again, it's good. Old habits are hard to break. But I know that there are some good people in the Obama administration that want to solve this thing peacefully, and this will empower them. It's not going to change things overnight in Washington either. It's kind of ironic how many similarities there are regarding this situation, both in Washington and Tehran. But I think that if Washington sees positive signs, there are people that are going to be willing to try to take advantage of them. There are going to be people that are willing to try to move. And this is honestly the best opportunity that we've had since Obama came into the White House. So it would be a massive miscalculation on the part of Washington to not seize the opportunity.
Let me thank all my guests, Fouad Izadi, Houman Majd and Reza Marashi. Don't forget, you can always find this program and many more at aljazeera.com. From me, Rida Fakhri, and the team, thanks for watching.